The first time Commander Velnar saw a human with a missing limb, he almost activated a diplomatic incident. It happened in the cargo bay of the United Coalition frigate Hallex, a sleek, silver vessel that floated like a ghost through the outer orbits of Saturn. The Coalition had extended an invitation to humanity, a relatively new species in the galactic community, to observe joint training exercises. It was meant to be a gesture of goodwill. Nothing too complicated, no politics, just drills, cooperation, and cultural exchange. Velnar, a senior officer of the Violin, had been tasked with overseeing the human delegation. His people, tall and lean with translucent skin that shimmered under ultraviolet light, were known for their caution and excessive preparation. Velnar took pride in these traits. He had read every document available on human physiology, psychology, and emotional behavior. He had underlined and annotated entire sections on trauma responses. He was prepared, or so he believed. "Careful when you step down," said the human liaison, a woman with cropped hair and a voice like sandpaper. "The gravity compensators are twitchy today." Velnar's elongated digits wrapped around the bulkhead rail as he descended. That's when he saw him. A man in standard-issue Earth defense fatigues, leaning against a crate and adjusting something on his leg. At first, Velnar thought it was a brace. But then the man detached the entire lower half of his left leg, revealing a sleek metal socket in place of flesh. The limb was artificial. A prosthetic. The man didn't seem alarmed or discomforted. He simply wiped the joint with a cloth, reattached the limb with a click, and stood up like he'd just tightened a shoelace. Velnar froze in place, his sensory membranes flaring red in alarm. He turned sharply to the liaison. "This one has suffered catastrophic trauma," he said. "Why is he not in medical containment?" The liaison blinked. "Oh, that's Duncan. He's fine." Velnar stared harder. "He is missing a limb." "Yeah, he lost it in Kandahar, stepped on a mine." "But he's good now." Velnar looked back at Duncan, who was now laughing at something another human had said. The prosthetic leg moved with near-perfect synchronization. No hitch, no waddling limp. Duncan even stomped it once, like testing the suspension on a vehicle. "He is." "Unbothered?" Velnar asked. "Yeah, he's a veteran. You'll like him. He's sharp." Duncan noticed them watching and walked over. "Hey," said Duncan, extending a hand. "You must be Commander Velnar. I'm Staff Sergeant Duncan Fisher, Earth Defense." "Retired." Velnar stared at the hand, then shook it hesitantly. The grip was firm. "Ah, yes, you are functioning," despite Duncan grinned. "The leg, oh, it's a good one. Titanium alloy gyroscopic stabilizers, Bluetooth. I can connect it to my phone and change modes. Hiking, sprinting, dancing. Got a salsa mode, even though I have no idea how to use it." Velnar turned to the liaison. "This is not standard behavior. All documentation suggests humans fear dismemberment with extreme intensity." "That's not wrong," Duncan said. "Nobody signs up for this, but you adapt." "That's what we do." Velnar opened his mouth to respond, but a sudden jolt rocked the bay. A klaxon blared. "All hands report to stations," said the ship's intercom. "Unidentified object incoming, potential hazard." "Welcome to space," Duncan muttered, already jogging toward the armory. "Wait," Velnar said, following. "You are not medical personnel. You should remain back." "I'm a security advisor," Duncan called over his shoulder, "and I didn't fly all the way out here to sit during the fun part." The next 20 minutes were a blur. The object was an abandoned mining drone tumbling erratically and leaking radiation. It clipped the ship's stabilizer fin before Velnar's crew could tractor it. Minor damage, but enough to warrant a hull inspection. Duncan volunteered. "Absolutely not," Velnar said. "I've done EVA repairs before," Duncan replied, already climbing into a suit. "I'll tether, keep it quick. You've got a radiation leak and a busted fin. You want to wait 2 days for a technician, be my guest." Velnar hesitated. "Your limb, will it endure vacuum exposure? It's sealed." "It's been through worse." He was out the airlock before Velnar could object again. From the observation panel, Velnar watched Duncan maneuver along the hull like he'd been born in zero gravity. The prosthetic leg clicked magnetically to the ship's surface, anchoring him as he worked. He moved with careful precision, patching the intake valve and sealing the leak with resin foam. The entire task took less than an hour. When he returned, Duncan peeled off the helmet and sighed. "Next time someone else can do that. My back's killing me." "You risked your life," Velnar said. "I fixed your ship. You are impaired. You should not be capable of such function." Duncan sat down and began unscrewing his leg. "You know, I had a lot of people tell me that early on, right after the surgery. You'll never run again. You'll never climb stairs. You'll never serve. Turns out people are bad at predicting what others are capable of." Velnar watched in silence as Duncan pulled a maintenance kit from his pack and began cleaning the joint. "Does it cause pain?" Velnar asked. "Sometimes," Duncan admitted. "Phantom pain, muscle tension. But it's manageable. I work out, I stretch, I take breaks." "You are not angry," Duncan looked up. "At what? The mine, the war, the bad luck? Sure at first, but anger gets heavy. I'd rather carry a metal leg than that weight." A quiet buzz came from the intercom. "Commander Velnar, bridge requests your presence." Velnar rose, but hesitated. "Will you accompany me?" he asked Duncan. Duncan stood, reattached his leg, and flexed it. "Sure." As they walked the corridor, Velnar kept glancing at Duncan's gait. "You are not afraid," he said finally. "I was," Duncan replied. "Fear's normal, but you don't stay afraid forever." Later that day, Velnar accessed the ship's medical files again. He reviewed every section on human trauma, resilience, and rehabilitation. The texts were filled with statistics, case studies, theoretical projections. None of them described Duncan. The next morning, a training simulation was held in the ship's lower bay. Each species demonstrated tactical maneuvers. The violin used coordinated motion and levitation suits. The Zervax slithered in perfect formation, and then came the humans. Duncan led his team in a breach and clear exercise, moving through mock corridors with swift, practiced fluidity. The prosthetic leg never slowed him. In one moment, he crouched behind cover, signaled silently, then swept the room with textbook precision. When the exercise ended, Duncan was the last man standing. Later, Velnar approached him in the mess hall. "You do not match our projections," he said. "Most people don't," Duncan said, chewing a protein bar. "I would like to understand more deeply." Duncan shrugged. "All right. Meet me in the gym at 1800. I'll show you how this thing really works." At 1800, Velnar arrived to find Duncan on a treadmill, jogging. He increased the incline, then the speed. Sweat dripped from his forehead. "This is a combat-grade prosthetic," Duncan explained between breaths. "It's designed with adaptive feedback. It senses terrain and pressure, but it's not magic. I still have to train." He stepped off and unstrapped the leg. "Here," he said, handing it to Velnar. Velnar held it gingerly, surprised by the weight and texture. It was not cold, but warm from Duncan's body heat. The sensors pulsed faintly. "This is not merely a tool," Velnar said. "It is part of you." "Exactly." Velnar returned the leg. Duncan reattached it without fanfare and stood. "How long did it take you to function again?" Velnar asked, walking. "A couple months. Running took longer. The mental part, that's the slowest." Velnar nodded. "You adapted, not out of arrogance, but necessity." "Yeah." That night, Velnar recorded a message to the Violin High Council. "Update on human behavior," he said. "Prior assessments of psychological trauma due to limb loss must be revised. One subject, Duncan Fisher, exhibits high function, tactical competency, and emotional stability despite amputation. Prosthetic integration appears advanced. But more importantly, emotional adaptability is higher than anticipated. I recommend further study not of their technology but of their mindset." He paused, then added, "I believe we have much to learn from them." The next day, the Hallex received a signal from a derelict cargo ship near Titan. A rescue operation was launched. Duncan volunteered again. Velnar did not stop him this time. The derelict near Titan wasn't quiet. That was the first surprise. The second was the noise. a low, rhythmic thumping that echoed through the bulkheads of the rescue shuttle as it docked. Not mechanical. Organic. Duncan clipped his tether to the airlock rail, the hiss of his suit seal barely noticeable over the pulse. He tilted his head, listening. "I thought this was supposed to be unmanned," he said. Velnar, floating just behind him in his own suit, a shimmering, iridescent design with a high collar that flickered with stress indicators, tapped a sensor on his wrist module. No life signs detected, but audio readings indicate internal movement. Could be residual vibrations, Duncan offered. Or something loose in the structure, or a life form outside our parameters. Duncan gave the bulkhead a knock. Sounds like a headache either way. The corridor they entered was narrow, coated in a film of dust that hung suspended in the low gravity. Panels had been ripped open, wires coiled like vines across the ceiling, and one of the interior doors was jammed halfway open, crushed inward. Velnar moved cautiously, his suit's directional thrusters whispering with each correction. Duncan, on the other hand, used the magnetic toe of his prosthetic to anchor each step. He moved slower than usual, checking corners with the familiarity of someone who had once trusted a doorway and paid dearly for it. "Atmosphere's dead," Duncan said, watching his suit's monitor. "No pressure cycle in over a week. Whatever made that noise, it's not breathing. Unless it does not require breath." Comforting. They reached a central control room where an auxiliary power light flickered faintly. Duncan crouched near the console, brushing away debris. "Looks like a cargo hauler, civilian registry. No distress beacon was ever triggered." "Suggests rapid failure," Velnar said, "or deliberate sabotage." Duncan tapped a few controls. A sputtering display came to life, revealing a log of internal activity. He skimmed it. Last logs corrupted. "But check this: motion sensors in Cargo Bay 4 tripped 12 hours ago, repeatedly." Velnar's hand hovered over his belt. "We proceed with caution." Duncan nodded and turned. As they moved, he glanced at the wall-mounted schematic. Bay 4's 2 levels down. Closest path is through the maintenance shaft. Minutes later, they were climbing. Duncan's prosthetic made a click every time it secured to a rung, a sound that could have been annoying if it weren't so methodical. Velnar kept glancing down at it. "You are confident it will maintain grip. It's got better traction than my real foot ever did." "You say that with certainty." "Because I've tested it in worse places than this. Sand, ice, mud, oil, and one time a malfunctioning zero-G toilet system. Don't ask." Velnar didn't. They reached the bay entrance. The door had been forced open from the inside. Velnar's suit lights cast long shadows across the floor, then something moved, not fast, more like a shifting pile of cloth. Duncan raised his arm, light beam narrowing. "Wait," he said. "That is someone." They stepped closer. It was a man, gaunt and shaking, wrapped in a thermal blanket and wedged behind a stack of crates. His oxygen mask was cracked, his skin pale and slick with sweat. His breathing was shallow. "Holy hell," Duncan muttered. "He's alive." Velnar scanned him. "Human. Severe dehydration, core temperature below safe levels, no visible wounds." Duncan knelt, unfastening his own emergency flask and pressing it to the man's lips. "Slow sips. Don't gulp it." The man blinked, eyes fluttering. He whispered something, but the helmet's mic didn't catch it. "His vocal cords may be strained," Velnar said. "This is unexpected." "No kidding. They got him to the shuttle 20 minutes later." Duncan stayed beside him the whole time, using a portable heater to stabilize his body temperature. The man was conscious by the time they reached the Hallex, but his words remained slurred. By the next day he could speak. "Name's Petrov," he rasped, lying in the infirmary while Velnar observed from behind a transparent partition. "Cargo engineer, we got hit by, I don't know, something fast. Punched through our communications deck. I was in the bay when the breach hit. Everyone else was forward." "There was no beacon," Duncan said. "Comms fried. I couldn't get to the core. Emergency systems went dark." "You survived 8 days alone." 9, Petrov corrected. "I rationed the emergency packs, slept inside an insulation container, drank condensation." Velnar's membranes pulsed in a dull green, a sign of confusion. You were entombed in a hostile environment with no light, no contact, and no atmosphere. And yet you endured without external assistance. Petrov gave a dry chuckle. Not the worst Tuesday I've had. Later, in the observation lounge, Velnar stood beside Duncan, watching Saturn's rings spin in slow silence. I reviewed Petrov's biometrics. His body entered hypometabolism within 30 hours, a state your kind is not known for inducing voluntarily. We don't, Duncan said. But the body can do weird things when it's desperate, slows itself down, focuses on survival. You both display this. Tenacity is inherent, not always. Some people break, I've seen it, but others, they dig in, even when it makes no sense. Velnar turned. Your leg, it does not hinder you, but it is not as efficient as organic tissue. No, but it's reliable and it's mine. It is heavy. Yeah. So's carrying regret. They stood in silence for a while. Have you ever considered replacement with cloned tissue? Velnar asked. Our medical division could attempt, already offered, declined. Why? Duncan tapped the side of his prosthetic. I trained with this, learned to fight with it. It's not about returning to what I was, it's about moving forward with what I have. Fascinating, Velnar said quietly. You do not view restoration as the ideal, you see adaptation as identity. That's one way to put it. A few days later, Petrov was well enough to walk. He wasn't fast and his hands still trembled, but he insisted on visiting the bay where Duncan repaired the stabilizer. I heard about your Eva, he said, gesturing at the hull plating. You sealed that with a foam patch, better than nothing. Damn. Remind me never to play poker with you. Velnar approached them, holding a small data crystal. The council has requested a report on the incident. They wish to interview both of you. Petrov blinked. Me? Why? You represent an anomaly, prolonged survival under extreme duress. They wish to understand your methods. I didn't do anything special. Duncan looked at him. You stayed alive, that counts. Petrov hesitated. Well, I kept thinking about my kid. She just turned 6. I promised I'd bring her a rock from Saturn's rings. Silly, I know. Velnar tilted his head. This promise, it sustained you. Yeah, I guess it did. Velnar didn't respond, but his membranes shifted to an unreadable hue. That evening, the three of them sat in the mess hall. Duncan was adjusting the tension coils in his ankle while Petrov picked at a tray of rehydrated pasta. You ever think about getting something sleeker? Petrov asked, nodding at the leg. They've got models that look almost natural now. I don't want it to look natural, Duncan said. I want it to look earned. Petrov thought about that for a moment, then nodded. Velnar remained silent, but later that night, he sent another encrypted message to the High Council. Human adaptation continues to defy our predictive models. Survival appears tied not only to physical resilience, but to emotional constructs. Promises, memories, identity. These are not incidental. They are integral to endurance. He paused before adding the final line. They do not merely survive damage, they incorporate it. The Hallex's infirmary smelled faintly of sterilized plastic and ozone, not unpleasant, just unmistakably artificial. Duncan sat on the edge of the diagnostics bench, his shirt off and his prosthetic leg detached and resting on the counter beside him. A technician from the Violin medical delegation hovered nearby, scanning his residual limb with a handheld device shaped like a tuning fork. It emitted a soft pulse with each pass. You're not going to find anything new, Duncan said as he flexed his thigh. We are not searching for pathology, replied the technician without looking up. We are documenting muscular activity in response to sustained prosthetic load. Your tissue demonstrates unusual density for a human of your age bracket. Thanks, I think. Do you experience thermal imbalance in the residual limb during exertion? Sometimes, yeah. Depends on how long I'm moving and the ambient temperature. I've got a liner that wicks sweat, but it still gets uncomfortable after a few hours. The technician made a note on her pad, and you self-adjust the socket fit. Yeah, I've got an adjustable sleeve. Micro pumps let me tighten or loosen the fit depending on swelling. At a nearby console, Velnar observed silently. He hadn't said much since the rescue mission. Not out of disinterest, if anything, his attention had sharpened, but his questions had grown rarer and far more specific. "What keeps the interface from causing skin breakdown?" he asked suddenly. "Routine maintenance. Good hygiene. And I rotate the pressure points when I can. I also take it off during sleep. You disassemble yourself nightly." "That's one way to put it." Velnar turned to the technician. "Ensure the data includes compliance habits. Psychological factors may be more influential than biological ones." Duncan reached for a towel and wiped the sweat from his chest. "You always talk like you're writing a paper." "I am." "Right." The technician stepped back and gestured toward the leg. "May I be my guest?" She lifted it gently. "This is heavier than I expected. Balance over comfort. I don't mind the weight." She tilted the leg to examine the rotor assembly. "Have you considered a powered model? Used one for a while, didn't like it." "Too much lag between thought and action. I'd rather have control than automation." Velnar tapped his pad. "You favor interfaces that require effort." "I trust what I can feel. When something's too smooth, you stop paying attention. That's when you get hurt." The technician nodded. "Interesting philosophy." "I call it learning the hard way." A soft chime sounded from the corridor. Petrov appeared in the doorway, walking with a slight hunch but no assistance. "They said you were in here," he said. "Didn't want to miss the show." "Just a leg check," Duncan said. "Nothing dramatic." Petrov leaned against the frame. "I heard the violin are trying to figure out what makes you tick, more like what keeps me ticking." "Same difference." Velnar looked up. "You appear ambulatory." "Still sore," Petrov said. "But I'll live." Duncan reattached the prosthetic with a hiss and click, then stood and rolled his ankle experimentally. "Well," he said, "I'm good for another few hundred miles." "You make it look easy," Petrov said. "It's not, but it gets easier." Velnar approached. "Your cooperation has been invaluable. I have compiled a complete report for the Council. They will be reviewing the findings within 2 cycles. "Glad I could help," Duncan said. "There is one final matter," Velnar added. "The Council would like to recognize your contributions in a formal capacity." Duncan raised an eyebrow. "A medal, an honorary designation. Non-citizen contributor to interspecies resilient studies." That's a mouthful. It carries access to coalition research archives and diplomatic forums. "You're offering me a library card. A very exclusive one." Duncan folded his arms. "What's the catch?" "No catch. But we would request occasional consultation. Your insights into human adaptation are unique." Petrov snorted. "You just want to keep poking the guy with the robot leg." Velnar blinked. "That is not inaccurate." Duncan considered it. "All right. But if I'm going to be part of your think tank, I want something in return." "Name it." "I want your engineering team to build adjustable socket liners based on human feedback. There are people back home who don't have access to tech like this." "If we're sharing knowledge, let's make it count." Velnar hesitated. "That was not anticipated." "Well, now it is." The technician looked at Velnar. "It's feasible?" "Then it will be done," Velnar said. Duncan nodded. "Good." Later that evening, the 3 of them sat near the observation dome. Outside, Saturn's upper atmosphere painted slow-moving golds and pale greens across the curve of the planet. "Never thought I'd end up here," Petrov said. "Saturn. In a chair with a guy who walked through fire and an alien who reads vitals like poetry." "Life's weird," Duncan said. "No argument." Velnar tilted his head. "Do you regret coming?" "Not a chance," Petrov said. "But I do miss coffee. We have stimulants." "They taste like burnt algae." Velnar paused. "That is accurate." Duncan leaned back. "You know, the thing nobody tells you about losing a limb is how quiet it gets, not just physically. Mentally. You spend so much time adjusting that you forget what normal felt like. Then one day you stop noticing the difference." Velnar glanced at him. "You do not perceive yourself as incomplete." "No, I'm changed, not broken." Petrov turned to Velnar. You ever lost anything, a limb, a piece of yourself? Velnar was quiet for a moment. My first mission. I lost an entire research pod, 8 colleagues. I was responsible for their transport alignment. I miscalculated a gravitational vector. Duncan didn't respond right away. Then he said, and you kept going? Yes, then you get it. Velnar nodded once. The next morning, Duncan packed his gear. His tour aboard the Hallex was over. A civilian transport would take him back to Earth orbit, where another ship would bring him home. Velnar met him at the docking bay. You are certain you wish to leave? Yeah, time to get back to work. You could stay. I've got people waiting. And I've got a daughter who thinks I'm indestructible. Velnar held out a small case. A gift, compressed data storage, every note we compiled during your visit. Duncan tucked it into his bag. Thanks. There is one final question. Shoot. Will you continue using the same prosthetic until it falls apart? Why? Because it reminds me what I've already survived. Velnar didn't reply. Duncan stepped into the transport airlock. Before the door closed, he turned. Don't forget to update your files. Humans don't fear losing limbs. They fear losing purpose. The door shut with a hiss. Velnar stood alone in the corridor, the ship silent around him. He tapped his wrist module, opened his report, and added one last line. They do not mourn what is gone. They build with what remains.